Of course it's counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. Of course common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Which exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
Well, I think it's a bit funny to be trying to define nothing.
We live in a world where there is more access to information than ever before. Generations, young and old, are being exposed to radically different ideologies and opinions every day. It can be so overwhelming, trying to decipher what's true and what's false. But there is a way. Join me as we discuss some of the toughest questions out there about Christianity, the Bible, and culture. I'm your host, Nick Lackey. Welcome to The Garrison. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Garrison. If you're listening to this episode on the day that it released, then if I've done everything correctly, it is January 1st. So Happy New Year. I hope you're having a great day. That feels a wee bit weird to say as I'm recording this in December of 2023. But anyway, I hope your year has started off well. Or if you're listening past the time of the release date, then I hope your year's going well anyway. Now, before we get into today's topic, I will mention, since it's kind of the start of the year, that the Garrison will be having some changes this year, which is very exciting. I'm getting a wee bit of a new studio, which will hopefully improve the look and sound of everything that is produced. And I want to be doing a few things differently. I want to start doing a few more street interviews with people, so hopefully that's going to be coming out on social media and YouTube. And I also want to be doing more interviews with non-Christians. We did a few of those last year. There was one with one of my friends, Ray Baker, and another one with a friend, Oakley, and I think they went really well. I personally really enjoyed doing them, and I think they were really beneficial for the audience. So if you think that's something which you want to do, then please let me know. My email is thegarrisonpod@gmail.com. You can email me through there, or you can get in touch via social media. If you know anyone who would love to come onto the podcast to debate something, or if they disagree with any of the things I've been saying, then please feel free to let them know. Or if that's you, then let me know, and I'd love to do an interview with you, and we can have a discussion, and we can both get to know one another's viewpoints a wee bit better. And I think that makes great content, so I'm super keen for that. Another thing is that on this episode right now, there's currently a storm outside, so if you hear rain and thunder, I apologize for that. Hopefully it doesn't come through. Anyways, we're going to get into today's episode, which is the cosmological argument, how we can know that there was a creator of the universe. Now, if that sounds similar, we did actually cover this topic on the second ever episode of The Garrison, but since it's the start of the new year, I want to go right back to the start of the Bible, which is in the beginning God, and then goes on to explain the creation of the universe. And so I want to talk about how we can know that that's true, how it's not just a fairy tale which has been made up. So first point I want to make is, do you remember those magicians who seem to always pull things out of nowhere? I remember as a young child going and watching magicians, and they would seem to just pull birds out of thin air, or maybe it's the rabbit from the hat. It just baffled me how they could do that. And I always was in awe when I watched, but I was never completely fooled. Even as a child, I thought, man, how are they doing that? But I never truly believed that they had actually made a bird out of thin air. And that's the thing about watching a magician, I think, is that we know that logically they aren't actually just clicking their fingers and creating a bird. But instead, the thing which fascinates us is, man, where was the bird hiding? We know it must have come from somewhere. But where? You see, even at a young age, kids are pretty dumb and naive, and I was one of them, but they aren't stupid. They still know things don't just pop into thin air out of absolute nothing. Now, when it comes to talking about where the universe came from, the same thing applies. There's two options here. There's not 3 options or 4 options, there's 2. And these 2 options are either nothing created everything, or something created everything. There's no in-between, middle ground, or third option. Logically, these are the only 2 options as to where the universe came from. Yet some of the world's brightest minds have come to this belief that it was the first option, that nothing created everything, and that everything in this world came from nothing. And I'm going to play a clip very shortly. There was a discussion between Richard Dawkins, who is an evolutionary biologist, and Cardinal George Pell, who is the former Catholic Archbishop of Sydney. And so I'm going to play the clip now and just listen to what Richard Dawkins says about nothing.
Of course it's counterintuitive that you can get something from nothing. Of course common sense doesn't allow you to get something from nothing. That's why it's interesting. It's got to be interesting in order to give rise to the universe at all. Something pretty mysterious had to give rise to the origin of the universe. Which is exactly what's meant by nothing, but whatever it is, it's very, very simple. And why is that funny?
Well, I think it's a bit funny to be trying to define nothing.
Now, personally, I found that clip very entertaining to watch, as did most of the audience by the sounds of it. And you can see what he's done there. In explaining that nothing created something, he goes on to state that nothing is something. So there we have it. One of the most famous and world's most renowned atheists out there, he's stating that nothing is something, and therefore something actually created the universe. Now, why are these brilliant minds, and I truly believe he is someone who is a brilliant mind, but it's almost as if they are thinking too hard about it. And here's where I think we get an answer from Scripture. In Romans 1:18, it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things." Now that last part, I believe, is talking about idol-worshipping pagans, but I think the principle can be applied to materialists today. They suppress the truth in unrighteousness, which means their sin is actually stopping them from seeing the truth, and professing to be wise, they became fools. It's pretty foolish to believe that nothing can create something. In fact, in Psalms it says, "The fool has said in his heart that there is no God." When you come to this belief that nothing can create something, it's a foolish thing. Although you may have a PhD, you may be some wonderful scientist who, in some areas, you are truly a genius, but when it comes to this, you profess to be wise, but you become a fool to believe that nothing can actually create something. It is such an obvious truth to us. Now, often these big scientists with PhDs can seem like a giant to face up to. As a Christian, anyway, we feel like we must be equally matched with them in qualifications or study. I used to think maybe, I could never go and talk to someone like Richard Dawkins or Lawrence Krauss, who's another one of these scientists. I could never go and talk to them because they know so much. I mean, they've got PhDs, they've devoted their life to this stuff. Yet they believe nothing created something. Even a child can understand that. That doesn't make sense. Lawrence Krauss, as I mentioned before, he gave a presentation on why there is something rather than nothing. And he has even written a book on it, which is called A Universe from Nothing. Now, on his talk, which he presented, A Universe from Nothing, here's what he says. I'm going to play a clip again, and this is what he says about Christianity in the Bible.
Addressing this question that's been around for as long as people have been around, why is there something rather than nothing? And people have asked that question, as they say, as soon as they could ask questions. And there's lots of different ways of answering it. You can just you can write in the beginning and then have a whole book that doesn't explain anything about anything. And, or you can actually turn to the universe and try and figure out the answer. And that's what I want to talk about.
Now, under the description for this video that I watched, it was posted by Harvard University. Here's what they say. The question, why is there something rather than nothing, has been asked for millennia by people who argue for a creator of the universe. Taking a trip back to the beginning of the beginning and the end of the end, and reviewing the remarkable developments in cosmology and particle physics of the past 40 years that have revolutionized our picture of the universe, Lawrence Krauss explores the discoveries that have revolutionized our understanding of both nothing and something. It has become clear that not only can our universe naturally arise from nothing without supernatural shenanigans, but that it probably did. But if you watch the video, if you hear Lawrence Krauss talking about nothing, he does the same thing Richard Dawkins does. He starts giving it attributes. Oh, nothing is actually more of like a quantum vacuum. Well, in which case, no, it's not nothing, it's a quantum vacuum. I mean, I was listening to a debate between Lawrence Krauss and a Christian. I can't remember his name, but the host of the debate, in the middle, he says, so what you're saying, Lawrence, is actually, it's not a universe from nothing, it's a universe from a quantum vacuum. In other words, Lawrence is trying to describe nothing and he's giving it attributes. And that's the problem that these people fall into. We all know that nothing cannot create anything, so therefore we have to kind of give nothing these attributes, in which case it is something. Anyway, I'm going around in circles, but I want to bring up this quote from G.K. Chesterton, who's a Christian, and he said, "When men choose not to believe in God, they do not thereafter believe in nothing. They then become capable of believing in anything." And I think that's so true. When we give up God as the explanation for the universe, we'll start to grapple at anything that can help us describe how it came to be. And we end up with these foolish beliefs that nothing created everything. It's absurdity. So then, from a Christian point of view, how do we know that the universe was created, that God is real? Well, what I'm going to present now is the cosmological argument, and I've spoken about this before on the Garrison, but we're going to talk about it in a wee bit more depth today. The cosmological argument is a simple argument which goes like this. The first premise is whatever begins to exist has a cause. The second premise is the universe began to exist. And the conclusion is, therefore, the universe had a cause. Now, this is a simple deductive argument, which means if the first two premises are true, this means the conclusion must be true. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines cosmology, or the cosmological argument, as a branch of astronomy that deals with the origin, structure, and space-time relations of the universe. And so this argument is an argument made from cosmology, from looking at a cosmological evidence that there was a beginning of the universe. So in order for the conclusion to be true, the first two premises must also be true. So what we're going to do now is look at the premises and examine, are these really true? So the first premise we've got is whatever begins to exist has a cause. I want to ask you a question. How often do we see things popping into existence out of thin air? Never. We never see things popping into thin air. If you have, please let me know. Everything which begins to exist has a cause. This is a concept so simple that children and even people like me can understand. And as I was saying before, when children watch magician shows, they are in awe, but they're not so naive that they truly believe the magician is creating it out of thin air. Or at least I wasn't as a child. Now, what if I said, in order to prove that there was a cause, you must have seen it happen? I was out on the street not too long ago, and I was talking to a young guy. I was trying to share with him the good news of Jesus. And when talking about whether God exists, he said, I'm the kind of guy that needs to see it to believe it. And many people make this claim. They say, I'm a see it to believe it kind of guy. If I can't see God, then he's not real. And so I asked him, you see that building over there? Have you ever seen the builder of the building? And he said, no. And then I said, well, how do you know that he exists? And then he started to realize the logic. Well, if the building is there, naturally, there had to have been a builder. You see, he wasn't really a see it to believe it guy. That was an excuse that he had made up to kind of convince himself that God wasn't real. But there are so many things that we don't see, but we still believe. I'll give you another example. Imagine if you went to a city one day and there was extreme flooding. The streets were, there was water which was waist level high, really bad flooding in the city, okay? But you had just arrived when you saw the effect of the flooding. Now, you wouldn't have to see all of the rain or even see the clouds. You know that the cause must have been a whole lot of rain, or maybe perhaps a tsunami or something like that. In other words, you didn't have to see the cause, you only saw the effect. But by seeing the effect, you believed in the cause. I'll give you another example. Imagine that you were a dentist and someone came in with extreme cavities in their teeth and they've got really rotten teeth. Now, you weren't there when it happened, but you know, due to the effect, that this person hasn't been taking good care of their teeth. In other words, you haven't been with this person every step of the way, seeing how they don't take care of the teeth. Instead, by seeing the effect, which is rotten teeth and cavities, you know the cause, that they haven't been taking good care of the teeth. This is basic cause and effect stuff. Again, children can understand it. I used the example before of a building. We don't have to see the builder of a building to know that there must have been a builder. The same applies with a song. You don't have to have met the artist of a song. Once you hear the song, you know that there was naturally going to be an artist. Same with a painting. If you see a painting, you don't conclude that it just made itself. You don't have to have met the painter or ever seen them, but you know that there must have been a stage in which someone, the artist, painted it. We know that every effect has a cause. This is an axiom, which is a self-evident truth. An axiom is defined as a statement or proposition which is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidently true. That's according to the Oxford Dictionary. So premise 1 is correct. Whatever begins to exist must have a cause. Now secondly, the universe began to exist. This is the second premise. Because if the universe never began to exist, then it wouldn't need a cause. So did it actually begin to exist? What does the evidence show? Can we make an argument that this is true, that it really did have a beginning? Okay, so logically, let's start with this. We're going to get to the scientific evidence in a second, but logically, if the universe isn't finite, in other words, it's infinite, then it never had a beginning. But could the universe be infinite? Well, let me ask you this. Is infinity a number? I often ask this to children at my workplace. I work at a children's program, and I say, what's the biggest number you ever know? And one kid will yell out, infinity. And another kid will say, infinity times infinity. And they'll go on and say these things. But is infinity actually a number? If so, what's infinity minus 1? Is that number, infinity minus 1, smaller than infinity? Or what's infinity times 2? Do we suddenly have a greater number? Well, no, infinity isn't actually a number. If we add 1 onto infinity, we're not getting a greater number because it's not a number. And so if we have been around for an infinite amount of days, then is our history going to become longer every minute that passes? Well, how can that be? You see, the very fact that we can add one day onto another and that we are going through time goes to show that there must have been a beginning of time. The universe, logically, cannot have been infinite. Okay, but is there scientific evidence which backs that up, that there was a beginning of the universe? Absolutely. I'm going to go through an acronym now called SURGE, and each letter of this word SURGE, it's S-U-R-G-E, represents a line of scientific evidence, and I'm going to go through them as simply as I can. The first one is the second law of thermodynamics. Now, the second law of thermodynamics states that the universe is slowly running out of usable energy, and that's it in simple terms. In other words, when the universe was created, there was a certain amount of energy. We know that energy cannot be created or destroyed, so there was a finite, a limited amount of energy. But our second point is that the universe is expanding. So therefore, it's a bit like, imagine blowing up a balloon. When you blow up a balloon, does the mass of the balloon increase? In other words, is there more balloon being created as it's blowing up? Well, no, it started off with a certain amount of balloon, but it's just expanding and it's getting thinner and thinner on the edges. And if you keep going, eventually it's going to pop. Likewise, the energy of the universe will continue to get thinner and thinner as the universe expands until it's cold and there will be no more life. We have measured this scientifically, and we know that the universe is slowly running out of usable energy. Now, if it's slowly running out of usable energy, it must have had a starting point. If we've been around for an infinite amount of time, then we would have run out by now. It just doesn't make sense. And the second point, which I mentioned before, the U in SURGE stands for the universe is expanding, and this was detected by Edwin Hubble in 1929. This one's pretty simple. If it's expanding, it must have had a start point of expansion. Number 3, the R stands for the radiation afterglow, and this is described as being like the smoking gun of the Big Bang. Now, when I say the Big Bang, I'm not referring to the Big Bang from nothing. I'm referring to the Big Bang created by God, and that God, there was a time when he said, let there be light, and he created the universe and everything within it. This was a expansion such as a Big Bang. And so Christians don't have to deny the Big Bang, we just have to deny the fact that it came from nothing. Instead, the Big Bang, or the creation of the universe, it came from God, and he intelligently designed everything. Okay, going back to radiation afterglow. This was discovered when Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, they detected the strange radiation on their antenna at Bell Labs in Holmdel, New Jersey. Now, this is technically known as cosmic background radiation, and it's actually afterglow, which is light and heat from the initial explosion of the Big Bang. It's no longer, this light is no longer visible because its wavelength has been stretched by the expanding universe, which we just talked about. But the heat can still be detected. In fact, as early as in 1948, 3 scientists predicted that this radiation would be out there if there really was a Big Bang. And for some reason, no one attempted to detect it before Penzias and Wilson stumbled upon it. It's actually, it's also referred to as cosmic microwave. In fact, did I say that before? No, I said cosmic background radiation. Another name is cosmic microwave background, and it's radiation which is left over from this early hot and dense state. This is some more scientific evidence that there was a beginning of the universe. We also have the Great Galaxy Seeds. Now, this one's probably the most complicated, but it's basically saying that there are temperature ripples within this expansion, and because of these temperature ripples and differences, this allowed galaxies to be created. Now, these ripples were detected in 1992 when NASA launched a $200 million satellite, which was called COBE, or COBE, which was Cosmic Background Explorer. Now, they carried this really sensitive instruments, these really sensitive instruments which were able to see whether or not these ripples actually existed in the background radiation and how precise they were. And the project leader of this, his name was George Smoot. He announced when he discovered it, he said, if you're religious, it's like looking at God. This NASA astronaut said that because it was such strong evidence that there was a beginning of the universe. And he knew that if there was a beginning of the universe, there was probably a beginner or a creator, someone who caused this beginning. And finally, we have the E in surge, which is Einstein's theory of general relativity. His theory of general relativity is it's the 5th line of scientific evidence in this surge acronym. And the theory itself, it's been verified to within 5 decimal places. And it demands an absolute beginning for time, space, and matter. And it shows that these things, time, space, and matter, are correlative. You can't have one without the other. Now, if we have a universe which is made up of time, space, and matter, and we know that these things had a beginning, then it begs the question, what caused time, space, and matter to come into existence? Obviously, this thing cannot have been made up of time, space, and matter itself. It must have been timeless, it must have been spaceless, and it must have been immaterial. Do you know what we're describing here? We're describing the characteristics of the all-powerful God that Christians believe in. Now, if premise 1 and 2 are correct, which I believe they are, that everything which begins to exist has a cause, I believe that's absolutely true, and that the universe began to exist, I believe there's overwhelming evidence and arguments we can make for that. Therefore, the conclusion is true. Therefore, the universe had a cause. And as I mentioned, if it had a cause, it must have been spaceless, timeless, immaterial. And we'll add on there, it must have been extremely powerful in order to create a universe like this. And it would have been intelligent as well. And we're not going to get into the intelligent design of the universe on this episode. Perhaps we will soon. But that's why I believe in a creator of the universe. Now, I also want to mention here, if you're a Christian listening, or if you just want the simple conclusion of this whole entire podcast episode, if you don't want to get into the acronym of SURGE and remember all the scientific evidence, use the simple argument, or just ask someone, do you believe the scientific impossibility that nothing created everything? You could go on to say that a building is proof of a builder. You don't have to have seen the builder to know that there was one. In the same way, creation is proof of a creator. Now, referencing that clip that I played early on from Lawrence Krauss on his talk on a universe from nothing, he mocks the Bible and he says, you can write in the beginning and have a whole book that doesn't explain anything about anything. Well, you missed a word there, Lawrence. The Bible doesn't just say in the beginning and then write a whole lot of stuff which doesn't explain anything about anything. The Bible says in the beginning, God. It gives us something. Whereas your worldview says this, in the beginning, nothing. Which one really makes more sense? You guys be the judge of that. Going back to Romans 1, from verse 18, which we talked about earlier on, don't suppress this obvious truth in unrighteousness. Often it's our sin which blinds us to these realities. We don't want it to be true that there is a God. We don't want it to be true that there was a creator of the universe and therefore a creator who's going to judge us one day by what we've done. Because we love to sin, we don't want that to be true. But don't let your desire for sin suppress this truth. Instead, accept it. There was a creator. And the bad news is that, well, we're going to be judged by this creator for what we've done. And rather, the bad news is that we have sinned against him. That's not good. But the good news is that Jesus Christ, out of his love for us, because God the Creator loved us so much, he sent Jesus to die on the cross for us and take that punishment. And he says if we simply repent of our sin and put our trust in Jesus Christ alone, then we will be saved. That's the good news. That's what I want the Garrison to be about. Bringing this good news to people and answering questions that people have about Christianity. So thank you everybody for listening to today's episode, or this year's first episode of The Garrison. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to rate it on wherever you're listening to. Like, subscribe, comment, share your thoughts with me, all that good stuff. And if you would like to come into The Garrison as a guest, if you disagree with me and you want to have a convo, I would absolutely love that. Now, hopefully very soon you're going to start seeing a different look on camera, or maybe even hearing a different audio quality on if you're listening to this. We are making some changes to The Garrison, improvements, I hope anyway, and so I'm really excited to get to that stage and start bringing more content which will help answer your questions and strengthen your faith about Christianity. Thank you everybody for listening. We will see you on the next episode of The Garrison.